Whoa. Welcome to
to
a very echoey and loud MGO podcast. We're going to
Yes.
get that fixed just a second from now. It is Rutgers week. It is a road game, and the foot traffic in Moe's is slightly depressed. So if you're
Yeah.
looking for a roomy store with many great deals, come on down. We'll say hi. We probably won't because we'll be talking to each other, but whatever. Before we get into the various other things, in 2 weeks, we are going to be at the Bow Store, which is on Main Street. We're going to have beer and chairs, and hopefully we can get some questions from the audience. It's homecoming, and the Bow Store is totally awesome, as you might imagine. There are many bow-themed apparels and knickknacks and tchotchkes and key rings, which I guess are tchotchkes.
Yeah, that kind of falls under that category.
Well, I think a tchotchke is useless, so it'd be more of a knickknack. That's Ace Anbender.
Hi.
Hi. Say aloha.
No.
Why not? It's not Hawaii week.
I don't know.
That's not like, wearing the band's T-shirt to the band's concert. It's just,
Yeah, that's true.
wish it would be that for Hawaii week.
Well, they
it's
wouldn't
not
know
that
whether I
way.
was saying hello or goodbye, necessarily.
I think they would assume that since we just started this podcast.
I just like to make this
1
part of the
minute ago.
segment as painful as possible
Well,
for you. I have succeeded so many
if
times
only
over.
you were as good at the rest of your job as you are at that single minute of every podcast.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Is hiring me going to come up in our gimmicky top 5?
I thought about it. But then I had to
Too mean. I'm
So-
sitting right here.
Wisconsin,
They won.
they won
Great.
14-7. One last look back at that. We like to take a final look back at the previous game after I've had the opportunity to do a detailed rewatch, and Ace has also gone over the game again. And you had one major takeaway that you thought was...
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of bummed that you stole it for the first bullet point of the defense UFR, but I thought Matt Godin had a really good game. Because I've kind of been wondering, since Hurst has come back and has looked pretty spectacular, why Godin has still been the starting 3-tech, but he kind of showed, especially in the first 2 plays of the game, that he's definitely earned that spot, and it's not going to be particularly easy for Hurst to wrest it away from him necessarily.
Yeah, and then Hurst goes and does something like just teleports around 2 offensive linemen, and you're like,
That'll get him in the lineup.
But I do think that the emergence of Matt Godin into a legit starter on this defense is one of the stories of the first half of the season.
Yeah, because we were wondering whether he'd play. And that's and that wasn't really a knock on him. It was just a statement on how good this defensive line is.
Like, I remember the season preview, and I'm like, most years Matt Godin would be a starter on this line, and everybody would be like, pretty okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, as long as he wasn't the best guy on the line, they'd be like, all right, that guy's going to be a pretty good player. But I didn't see where the snaps were going to come from. And then the Monet injury and the Hurst injury opened the door, and he's walked through it.
Yeah, he really has. And he's been, the thing that we were worried about most from last year, which kind of got exposed post-Glasgow's injury, where he wasn't necessarily holding up well to double teams, he's even improved that part, and he doesn't really have to do that often when he's lining up next to Glasgow.
I mean, he did get blown out by 1 or 2, but their hit rate on those was a lot lower than it was last year. And even though Wisconsin had some issues on their offensive line, like if there's a team that's going to be able to just shove him off the ball, it's going to be Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So that was encouraging. And then, there were 2 or 3 plays when I had to go back and be like, who is that? Because I thought it was Glasgow.
I had that same thing during the game. I thought on the first 2 snaps, I was like, Glasgow's off to a great start. It's like, wait, no, he's standing next to that guy.
Because they're both white. They're
Yep.
both the exact same size. Their numbers are exactly like 1 pip different.
Yeah.
So it's like any guys who could be like brothers, once you put a helmet on, you got to change the first number.
That happens on defense with Jordan Lewis and DeMonte Thomas to me sometimes when they end up in the same area, because 25 and 26 look a lot alike from the booth or from the box, and it's easy to get those confused every once in a while.
And then Glasgow had a rampant game. I guess we can say that.
My goodness.
His Pro Football Focus number was +7, which is just a huge number for them. I think he was +15 again for
only 14.5.
14.5. He had a minus in there.
Yeah,
So
one solitary.
One solitary minus.
Just to show this grading is not totally bonkers.
Well, he did get blown out by 1 double. I remember the play. I was like, oh, that's a minus. How weird.
And then there was the one where he actually just burrowed completely under the double team to record a TFL, which a lot of people were mad at me for not including in the top 10 of the GIFs post, and I kind of understand.
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from in this game.
There was. I was trying to double up on pretty much every slot, and it still was hard to pick.
And then snap counts were kind of interesting because we saw Chase Winovich get 2, and Taco Charlton did not come off the field.
No.
And I was a little surprised by that because even if you don't want Winovich out there because he's a lot lighter than the rest of the defensive linemen, you do have Rashawn Gary as an option.
Yes.
And he also kind of...
He only had 13 snaps.
13 snaps and didn't do so hot. So maybe they're just taking their newer players and like removing them from the lineup because they have that luxury in a game like this.
Yeah. No, I mean, I noticed it live that it seemed like they were really tightening up the rotation, and against a team like Wisconsin where they have at least 3/5 of very good starting offensive line and some good blockers on the edges with their fullbacks and tight ends, it made sense to have guys who you knew were going to hold up on that. And I mean, Wormley and Charlton certainly did.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where what were my final like added 56 plus 11 minus. That is absurd.
Yeah. That's the thing you expect to see against like Hawaii.
Yes, and we did see stuff like that against Hawaii, and I think back to like when, I mean, no offense if Adam Patterson is listening to this podcast, but Adam Patterson was playing nose tackle, and he didn't really work out as a player, but he was definitely not a nose tackle.
No,
and it's just
he looked like a strong side end.
And it's absolutely night and day. Just the number of guys that they have, how good they all are, how consistent they are. Like you'll see guys kind of go up and down a little bit, but part of that is just the fact that. You know, sometimes Ryan Glasgow gets a sack and he gets the big points, and then Charlton.
It's like there was a GIF especially from the BT and Journey one, where the camera's focused in on Taco just tearing around the edge, and he's got his eyes on the QB, and he has this sack.
Yeah.
And then just out of nowhere into the frame comes Glasgow and hits him and they end up in a stack on top of the quarterback. And poor Taco,
yep.
You know he was thinking the whole way, like, this is mine. And nope, Glasgow's too quick.
I bet they get in like little snits with each other about like, why did you do that?
It's like, dude, it was my turn.
Come on.
But costing me All-American right now.
Obviously, just a complete defensive masterclass. The one thing that kind of bothered me a little bit is they had some opportunities over the middle.
Mm-hmm. Where it looks like the linebackers were kind of vacating.
Yeah, I don't know, though, because, you know, Michigan is... they're running mesh routes underneath, and Michigan appears to be in man coverage. And then you see this guy break so wide open over the middle and Stribling's so far off that it almost seems impossible that this was man coverage that he got beat on.
Yeah.
Because we've seen Stribling. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's never
And
happened.
he's playing outside leverage,
Yeah.
like, very intentionally.
So my assumption is that there's a guy in the middle who's doing something that he's not supposed to be doing. And I thought I saw that a couple times in this game. And then with the Colorado game on top of that, that seems like an area where maybe, you know, a Gideon or a McCray is supposed to be, and he isn't.
Yeah.
And that's it's a problem.
Yeah.
To some extent, you know.
As defensive concerns go, not the biggest one, but, you know, it's still something that can allow. I mean, Wisconsin did get a first down initially on a 20-yard throw over the middle where it looked like somebody probably should have been dropping under that.
Yeah, and they had an opportunity to make a catch on their final drive that was just dropped. Like it wasn't anything that Michigan did. So there were a couple of holes in there. But I thought I found something that seemed interesting to me based on that coverage, in that, you know, those two plays that Jordan Lewis is making against the run.
Yes. Like
on both of those, he's running with he's on the outside. His guy kind of runs a slant, but he's actually going to go make a crackback block. And Jordan Lewis, because of his positioning and the way that they're playing these routes, he can put his eyes in the backfield and check run or pass.
He just kind of peeled off.
Yeah. If it's a run, he falls off, and we saw that on the
pitch to Clement. Yeah,
the pitch to Clement, and then there were a couple other opportunities when Taco Charlton just spun inside of his guy when the offensive tackle is like, okay, this is the force guy, you just got to kick him out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden Taco Charlton's inside of him, and there doesn't appear to be a force guy, and I'm like, how do I grade this?
And then all of a sudden the corner's coming.
And then all of a sudden I'm like looking at Jordan Lewis, and he's like, Jordan Lewis just fell off that, so he's the force guy.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that Don Brown runs these defenses is because he can involve those cornerbacks in the run game so much more than they were last year.
Yeah. I feel very lied to for media
Lied
day
to?
when Jordan Lewis was like, the run defense responsibilities aren't different.
He
which
has
is-
some.
Yeah. And it was like, dude, I'm not an idiot, but
Well, that's always what they tell you. you know?
yeah, I know. It was just media day speak, but it was,
Yeah.
watching this game, it was very apparent, even more so than in earlier games, that they really have a lot of run responsibility, and they're good at it.
Yeah. Well, and so when those holes in the middle appear, I figure that like the linebacker has to be more responsible for that area of the field because they're buying extra guys in the box because they're using their corners as potential force players.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit less run active for the linebackers, and then you see that closed off. Not that it's going to matter against Rutgers.
No.
Not at all.
Nothing will matter against Rutgers.
And then the other thing with the snap counts is Lewis went the whole way.
Yep.
Taco went the whole way. Whatever injury issues they may have been working through, it seems like they're all the way back.
Yeah. Well, and I think Lewis kind of made a statement at the end there that he is
Okay.
pretty healthy.
Sure. And then the other thing that kind of leapt out at me is that Stribling had a game.
Yes.
And he got beat on the first play, which was a -2 for me because he couldn't make a tackle. And then he got a -4
For falling over.
for falling over on that play that could have been a touchdown. And he still ended up +5.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, +5 is a really good number for a defensive back because it means that you won a lot more than you lost. And just given the way I grade, like it's tough for them to get above 0 because usually when you see them in the frame, there's something bad is happening.
Yeah.
Right? Because
They're
people,
getting targeted.
they usually don't throw it at covered receivers.
No.
But for Stribling in this game, he had multiple pass breakups. He had the 2 interceptions. He could have had a third.
Yeah, and the first interception was darn impressive, where he's just mirroring that receiver's, basically running it for him.
Yeah.
And that's a ball that should never have been thrown, but it's impeccable coverage.
And NFL types are noticing him. You know, Harbaugh in the press conference this week said that he'll have a decade-long NFL career. And now that he seems to be firmly phased in with reality.
He's in this dimension.
I mean, he's always been good.
Yeah.
Like, he has always been a guy who is in position and just hasn't been able to make the plays, and now he's making the plays. I mean, so was he good? I mean, he was always in the right spot.
Yes.
But now he's actually existing, which is nice. On the offensive side of the ball, it was a really strange UFR from my perspective because
You initially thought Pro Football Focus was really harsh.
right, yeah, I did. I was like, these grades don't make any sense because they had the 6 runs at the end of the game and they had Spate doing some stuff, then fullbacks and wide receivers. But if you just look at the tailbacks during the portion of the game where Michigan is really trying to get yards instead of run clock, those guys average 5.1 yards a carry against a defense that is very good against the run. And I was like, this is a good performance, thumbs up, awesome. And then I looked at the Pro Football Focus grades because I was putting it in their table, and I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And then I'm like tallying up my own grades, and I was like, I got the same thing.
Yeah.
So that is,
I mean, there isn't an opponent adjustment inherent in there, which I'm assuming plays a part in that at least. 'Cause
Yeah, but-
Wisconsin does have a good defense.
so I always say that we want a 66% positive to negative ratio, and that's a good day on the ground. Michigan hit 56,
Yeah.
which is not usually 56 is like that's not going to do anything. So what that tells you is one, the tailbacks really did have a good day.
Yeah.
So Isaac made a lot of yards on his own. You saw Devion Smith make a lot of yards on his own. He had one bad cut that I didn't like very much, but
Yeah.
that's the second straight week that the running backs really seem to be having a positive impact on the game, which was not something that we saw much last year.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting tweeted at during the game, like, they need to give Isaac more carries. And I was like, well, Smith's looking pretty darn good, too. Like, I don't know. I mean, they've got 2 good backs there, and Evans had a nice run in there. I mean, they've got some players.
They do, and so Kalis had a great day, and then the other guys were kind of up and down. Maybe it's just one of those things where the grades don't always add up exactly to the yards because that's impossible. But
Yeah.
Against a very tough defense, I thought this was a good day on the ground. And Kyle Kalis,
Again.
we're 5 games into this season, and I don't know if I've seen more than a couple mental errors. And you're always going to make mental errors because offensive line is really tough.
Yes.
And that was-
Especially when Harbaugh's switching up the blocking schemes as much as he does.
And that was like the question with him last year. Like, he was really good when he wasn't blowing it with his mind.
Yeah.
And now that he seems like he's not blowing it with his mind, if that continues the rest of the year, he's getting drafted.
Yeah.
Like,
and I might be gloating about that draft again selection for a long time, even though I didn't want to make it.
Didn't want to make it.
It took me forever to land on it.
I took this Rutgers guy.
Who is grading out horribly.
Yeah, like
absolutely horribly.
It's not his fault.
Because he plays offensive line for Rutgers.
Yeah, it's everybody else's fault, and he just looks bad because of it.
Yeah, I'm sure
that's the ticket.
That's definitely it.
That's the ticket. Nobody cares about our fantasy.
No, they don't.
And then Spate, thrown into coverage. The actual interception didn't bother me.
Yeah, Jack Keeshy's really, really good at pass coverage.
And he lays out, gets a hand on it, great play. It is unfortunate that it deflects to a Wisconsin defensive back, but...
Yeah, normally worst case scenario, that's a pass breakup and an impressive one.
Yeah.
And instead it gets tipped right to Tyndall, and it's like, well, that's like terrible fumble luck, except it was on a pass.
Also, it's 2nd and 15 and the run and play action, and nobody's really biting on it. So you might expect that Cici takes a step forward, and then he's not there for that. Didn't happen. And if Cici doesn't intervene there, that's a 20-yard gain to Jake Butt.
Yeah.
So I was fine with that. I was less fine with a couple other instances. There was an out thrown to Perry that was so really, really far inside of him, and the defensive back fell down. Otherwise, that could have been an interception. There was, of course, the incident in the end zone.
Yeah, Grant Perry may not be the ideal panic jump ball receiver, and it was also just it was not the situation to try that anyway.
And then kind of the other downer from the game is that the pass protection was struggled.
Yeah. Magnuson got beat up by T.J. Watt a little bit.
He did, and the blitz pickups were iffy, especially because Michigan was tipping at snap count.
Yeah.
So they ran all that jet motion, and Wisconsin was using it as an opportunity to time up a blitz. And they got a holding call out of that. They got the near interception out of that. That was one of the main drivers for a pretty negative UFR rock, paper, scissors score.
Yeah.
And that's something that they got to get fixed. So.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already seen a thing that they have in the playbook that's supposed to mitigate that, where they run the receiver in jet motion and have him go past, and then either come back and take it going the other way or just go into a route from there. But they did not seem to be utilizing that against Wisconsin.
No, and they got away with it, and I got to think that they're apt enough to self-scout, especially with the bye week coming up.
Yeah.
That we'll see them.
And the functional bye week that's about to happen.
Yeah. We'll see them adapt, and hopefully that won't happen again, because one of the takeaways from last year's Michigan State game is that they'd been timing up Michigan snaps since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And that did not happen last year. Michigan actually got them as much as they got Michigan. So I don't think that's going to be an ongoing problem, but it's
something to keep an eye on.
If we see it against Rutgers, then they might just be keeping it in the barn so that because
there is no need to pull out anything exotic against Rutgers.
Well, we'll see.
Except for Rashawn Gary running in a touchdown, because that needs to happen.
So Michigan State will be the next real challenge for Michigan, and they might just dwarf it up for the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
But
I mean, when you play Rutgers in Illinois with a bye week in between.
So I've got that's about all I have for takeaways from film review of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm kind of just glad it's over because that was stressful, and now we're into 3. I wasn't stressed when the defense was on the field. It was the offense and the fear that just one little thing could go horribly wrong, and then all of a sudden the game that they absolutely should have won would get flipped.
Yeah, the one play where Stribling fell down was kind of
that was terrifying.
It was terrifying.
But it's over now.
It's over
top
now.
10 team.
All right, Steve Lorenz is not available today because he has a terrible sinus infection. But we are going to get to a break. We're going to talk recruiting anyway because we can do it. It's going to be outside the crooked blue line. Coming up right after this break.
In 1934, a salesman from Champion Sportswear walked into Moe's Sports Shop. There, he teamed up with George J. Moe to create the very first University of Michigan branded shirt. After seeing the high demand for this product, Champion went to the other Big Ten schools with the same proposal, and the collegiate apparel industry was born. Moe Sports Shops is celebrating 100 years of outfitting the Michigan faithful. Visit us at our original 1915 location at 711 North University, or online at 100years.mo. That's 100years.moe.
Want the perfect game day outfit? Underground Printing has unique, great-fitting apparel and officially licensed apparel from legendary Michigan names like Woodson, Howard, Schembeckler, Ufer, and more. UGP also specializes in custom printed apparel and promotional items for groups, events, and businesses. Whether you need one shirt as a gift or 1,000 shirts for a charity walk, Underground can customize almost anything for groups large or small. To learn more, visit Underground Printing at one of our 3 convenient locations around Ann Arbor or online at undergroundshirts.com. If you need a place to stay in Ann Arbor and don't want to be stuck out by I-94, there's a new hotel downtown, and the owners, who should be well known to the Michigan community, have asked our help to get the word out. The Martin family, yes, that Martin family, recently opened the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown, just a block from Main Street and a short walk to Michigan Stadium. They're competitively priced and offer a free hot breakfast, free Wi-Fi, fully equipped kitchen in every suite, and an indoor pool. That's the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown.
The places you'll go may seem far from Ann Arbor. From San Francisco to St. Louis to Shanghai. But as members of the Alumni Association, we're never far. Because Michigan is more than a place. It's a mindset that connects us. For those who leave Michigan, but for whom Michigan never leaves, this is where you belong. The Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. Join today at umalumni.com.
Welcome back to the MGO podcast live at Moe's. Ace will not say aloha. Oh, I have a cheese update for you.
Oh, you do?
I have a cheese update.
You are so excited about this.
One day, I hope someone says stick to cheese to me. That's my goal in life.
That's the dream.
That's the dream. So last week, of course, we discussed our favorite cheeses, and you were chagrined.
Some of us took it more seriously than others.
But you had American on it, like as in an attempt to make me upset. But American was on my list.
Yeah, that was a bummer.
And my wife has been invited to a quote mac and cheese contest, unquote. And she has purchased a 5-pound block of sharp American cheese.
Oh my goodness!
From the internet. And she was like, I asked her how much was it, and she's like, I don't want to tell you.
I want to hear it.
And then she was like, she finally like, all right, it was $30. And I was like, a podcast when we actually have reacts from all these recruits.
Yes.
We could talk about it on Sunday, but they're all flying home and nobody knows what's going on. But kind of the big takeaway from the weekend is that, oh my God, all of the offensive line recruits Michigan is in on.
Just all of them. I mean, Cesar Ruiz to start off with was the guy that seemed the biggest lock of all of them.
Yes.
And he's probably the only one that you could even sort of consider a lock. And he specifically contrasted his Michigan visit with his only other official visit that he's taken to North Carolina, and said this was 10 times better. So that seems good. And Alabama's already out of that race.
Yes.
So it's not even really clear who's running number 2 for him. And that's an elite center prospect who could also play their guard spot.
Number 1 in the country, and really impressed at the opening. Like a guy who, in a year where defensive tackle's a little bit down, he was dominating those guys. So powerful, powerful gentleman.
Yeah, and he was asked about, because he's still got Florida and Oklahoma left on his itinerary for official visits. And when asked about how that would go, he said, Michigan is in a good spot. We're going to leave it at that, but yes, Michigan is in a good spot right now.
I see.
That sounds good also.
Yeah.
Next guy down on my list, I'm actually going to skip him for the moment. Chuck Filiaga is the other one who kind of came out, depending on which 247 article you read, either strongly insinuating or flat out saying that Michigan has gained an edge in his recruitment.
Okay.
And these were interviews with the same person, so I'm assuming at some point he did say that Michigan has edged out in front.
That's Ryan Bartow.
That's Ryan Bartow of
who
247.
Put in a crystal ball for Filiaga to Michigan.
Yeah. So that was one of his I think it might have been either his first or second official visit, so there are still some visits to sweat out to real deal contenders, but he was a guy most people had pegged to USC early on, and that seems like not a great idea at the moment, so Michigan might be in a pretty good spot there too.
Well, it's just one of those things where there are some, like Steve has talked about this, how there are just some guys who are locked into USC more than any other school. And it's strange, but he doesn't seem like one of those guys. He's in Texas, but he just moved from California last year. So, like, yeah, he could go to Texas, but given what we're seeing at Texas right now.
Maybe not a great idea either.
And the fact that he's not actually from the state, like, I wouldn't necessarily think that would be a major factor for him.
Yeah, he's not your average Texas recruit. And also, Michigan's got the Polynesian connection going. They had Tony Tuioti all over that recruitment. So, and that has, I believe, from one of the more recent updates on Filiaga, that made an impact. So it seems like that is going to be an in for Michigan with a lot of recruits for a long time.
I'm so glad that they finally started doing that.
Yeah.
Like, every time a Poly kid came up and, like, Michigan would play against them, I'm like, man, I wish we had some Polynesians.
Yeah.
And
they got it rolling with Huma and Monet, and then since then it's, and then getting Tuioti on staff has clearly made a difference.
And it's kind of like its own state.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's
just spread across a large part of, like, just the western half of the United States, But
like, recruiting Polynesia is something that requires a specific skill set, and Michigan finally is emphasizing that.
Yeah, and it's paying dividends. That's
it is
for sure.
I mean, you've got Peya in this class. You've got some other guys. You've got Tufele who they're going after.
Yeah.
And it just seems like in general, a lot of the Polynesian guys are interested in the kind of things that Michigan has to offer.
Yeah, you've got the good academics going there.
So, I'm glad that there are a lot of Poly names on the board. Moving on to
Alex Leatherwood, I would say, is the next guy up here.
Okay.
Current Alabama commit, but
said some crazy things in the aftermath.
Yeah, the quote he gave to Tom VH was, phenomenal, unreal atmosphere, changed my recruitment big time. My dad loves it here. And that was a big deal because Sam Webb mentioned on the Victor's board that Leatherwood's dad was a major skeptic about him even visiting Michigan in the first place, and just really had to be convinced that Michigan was a realistic destination for his son. And not only did Alex say that his dad loves it here, Sam posted that his dad was sporting Michigan gear while he was up here on the visit. And while a lot of parents do that on an official visit, for him that apparently was kind of a sign that he's coming around to the idea that maybe a flip would be okay.
He also tweeted out that, like, that was his best visit.
Yes, period. He did. There was a lot of Twitter interactions between him and Jedrick Wills, who we should probably introduce into this conversation as well.
Yeah.
Like, high 4-star, I think he's still a 5-star on one or two sites, from Kentucky, who everyone was kind of expecting would commit to Alabama a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that has not happened. There are even some rumblings that maybe he's being shifted around on their board a little bit in a way that would greatly benefit Michigan at the moment, which would be nice. Yeah, seriously. So while Alabama is putting together a completely insane offensive line class, Michigan might be able to match that, and they could even potentially flip their 5-star tackle commit, which would be good.
And then you have Isaiah Wilson kind of hanging out there. You have the kid out of Washington that you're going to
Henry Bienvelu.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Aaron Banks, who's out of California.
Yeah. Banks seems like maybe the lowest shot on that list at this point.
I mean, he seemed enthused about the visit, but who knows where.
There wasn't an over-the-moon reaction like we've been getting this week.
And then you kind of got to go back to, like, the guys who are currently in this class, and I'm like, there's already 4 of them.
Yep.
I think Michigan can and should take up to 7.
Yes.
Especially because they're not redshirting Bredesen. They're not redshirting on Wainu. Like, you can bring in 7 guys and then play a couple of them maybe, and then the other guys who are redshirting are 2 years removed from this offensive line class.
And a couple of guys that they're after are definitely in the could physically play right away category. Isaiah Wilson is a house, and Leatherwood is same build.
Yeah, Leatherwood was people were agog over him at the opening as well. And Herbert has visited Florida.
Yeah, he's not totally solid in his commitment, it appears.
And he could flip, which
we haven't even brought up T.J. Slayton.
TJ is his teammate,
who's a 5-star guard.
which it would be odd if he flipped away from Florida and Slayton's still like, yeah, whatever.
And Slayton,
but nobody
there's
really
not necessarily a clear number 2 for Slayton either right now.
No, it's there's so many guys that they have in this class, and we could see some turnover.
Yeah, and we could also see, Leatherwood is committed to Alabama.
Right.
It's going to be tough to pry him away. Wills, if Alabama wants him, still seems like they have a pretty good shot to get him. There is the kind of post-visit afterglow factor where when these guys continue to take official visits, an official visit to Alabama, I'm sure, is quite an experience.
Has Leatherwood been to Alabama for a game yet?
I don't think he's been there on an official. I believe he's been there on an unofficial for a game, but I'm not sure about that. And I think most of his visits have been summer visits. So there is reason to believe that further visits might change his mind about what has been the best visit ever.
And it's just.
But man, they're in on so many top 100 guys.
It's really hard to see it not working out.
Yeah, the offensive line class is going to be good. There's no question about that.
And then I think Stuber is super underrated, but
and Honigford might make the Under Armour All-American game.
He's like in that situation where you got to vote for him.
You got to vote him in.
So it's like
still, but I liked both those guys' film in comparison to what they were rated.
All right, probably moving on to another position group that might see some movement soon. Oliver Martin took an official visit. There have been some rumors that he's going to end the process pretty soon. And the thing that kind of jumps out to me is that at 24/7, they're saying that Michigan has a lead over Michigan State. No, that's Scout. Sorry,
yes.
At Scout, they're saying Michigan has a lead over Michigan State. And at 24/7, the thing that Wiltfong says is that he thinks it could be Michigan, Notre Dame, or Iowa.
And Iowa has never really been mentioned that much as a factor in his recruitment. And the quotes after the Notre Dame visit were of the type where you think he's not going there.
No, yeah, especially because he saw them lose to Duke.
Yeah, so that doesn't help. And he saw Michigan beat a top 10 team. So when you're contrasting those two things, there seems to be an obvious choice there.
Yeah, and I think Sam said in the aftermath of the opening is that they were guys who were like their family was kind of like maybe Nate Johnson last year, where he wants to play on the biggest stage possible.
Yeah.
And so, no offense to Iowa, no offense to Michigan State.
This is a bigger stage. And also there was a lot of talk that they were kind of Harbaugh-type guys, that would appeal to them.
Yeah.
And, Harbaugh doesn't necessarily appeal to everybody, but the Martins, apparently, he struck a chord with them, so...
And it's interesting because his high school teammates committed to Michigan State.
Yeah.
But he also struck up a relationship with Dylan McCaffrey at the opening. And, just judging by the recruiting rankings, he can probably figure out which of those quarterbacks is a better bet.
And then you look at the roster and you see they've also got Brandon Peters there, who seems like he'd be a fun guy to catch passes from for a couple of years, so... Meanwhile, Michigan State's quarterback situation is crap.
Yeah, and I think we saw that he said that he wanted to take a couple more visits and then maybe get it out of the way.
Yeah, there were strong insinuations that he had an idea of where he wanted to go after this visit and just kind of wanted to confirm.
All right.
And that's a good sign.
That is a good sign.
Coming directly off a visit.
All right, what else what else happened, man, this weekend? There's a couple more things, I thought.
No, Baron Browning was on campus. We don't have a necessarily full reaction from him yet, but the early returns were relatively positive, although I think with him, nobody really has a great idea of who's at the top, and there are so many top-level schools in the mix for him that he's going to be a tough pull.
Yeah.
Just a 5-star linebacker from Texas. That is always going to be hard. And Ohio State is a big factor in his recruitment too. I think he's taking an official visit there for the game.
One thing that I did see was that his mom asked Harbaugh if he was going to stick around.
Yes, that did happen.
Browning's older brother committed to Stanford, and then Harbaugh went to the 49ers after his first year on campus.
Yeah.
So I hope he had a convincing spiel about how he bought his dad a house right next to him.
Yeah, I would assume at this point he has a pretty convincing
Yeah.
spiel on that. But also, I can understand skepticism from the parents of a recruit of a guy who's only been here 2 years and has a history of bouncing around, even if there's reason for that history.
I mean, really, the Stanford thing was the only time he jumped ship. So
Yes. And he did get an NFL head coaching job out of that, so pretty understandable still.
pretty understandable indeed. And then J2 Philly
Set up his official visit.
for the Illinois game,
Yeah.
which was one of two options.
Yeah, and I assume he will get the full court press there because that is not nearly as big of a visit weekend as Wisconsin in terms of the number and quality of recruits.
And he's like the number one guy on my board who I don't think Michigan is a strong leader for already,
yeah.
who I want to get in this class.
Yeah, DTs, they could definitely use a high-quality guy there. And also, I'm assuming, Utah is still a factor there, but when a guy has Utah, Michigan, and Ohio State as his top three, I'm guessing Utah is the least likely to get him, even though they're the home state school. I can understand the pull there.
The Poly thing is very strong.
That is a factor. Utah has fielded some strong defenses
Yeah.
recently. At the same time, the Poly factor gets mitigated a little bit based on what Michigan's got going on their coaching staff.
It's true.
If he's willing to go away from home, I mean, he's got two very good options at this point. But I don't know. I could see that one coming down to whoever wins the game. Which, not to add any more stakes to football Armageddon 2, but there could be some recruiting ramifications there.
Way to fire that one up.
Yeah.
Anything else before we get to our lightning round?
Bumper Pool loved his visit, and that
Okay.
needs to be mentioned.
Bumper pool.
And he did pay his own way because he's a 2018 recruit, and
Yeah.
he's from Texas. That looks good early.
Yeah. Are you ever going to not capitalize his name?
Absolutely not.
Like if he's a fifth-year senior, is he
It's like Leviticus Payne. It has to be capitalized always.
Man, Leviticus Payne. It's a blast from the past. When we do of the decade, we'll have to do names as well. Anyway, lightning round.
There was also a commitment, which we should probably talk about.
2018.
It is 2018, but Emil Ekiyor does look, I mean, he is a large dude. He's definitely an interior lineman.
Yes.
It was tough to glean too much from his film because the competition is not great. But he is quite light on his feet for a guy who is listed anywhere from like 225 to 200 or 325 to 350. He's a guy who's going to need some molding, but he looks like a player who's already like fringe top 100. And actually, he had a scarily tight range of rankings on in his commitment. I mean, he was, I think it was somewhere between like 123 and 127 overall
Really?
on all of it. Like insanely tight bunch. I've
Wow.
never seen a tighter one except when you're Rashawn Gary and you're number one everywhere. And it was good enough that his composite ranking is like 10
Above,
to 20
yeah.
spots higher than any individual ranking on the other sites. But he's a guy who's definitely a bit of a project in terms of what you need to get out of him, but there's a lot there to work with.
And he is, of course, a 2018.
Yeah. So now we've covered the commitment, which hopefully will stick. It's 2018,
I mean,
so who the hell knows?
Kid's from Indianapolis, so like
Yeah.
he's probably been to all of the local schools. I think that one's
Yeah, Chris
pretty
Evans was
likely to
pretty
stick.
hype about that commitment on Twitter.
Yeah.
They like getting the Indianapolis connection going. So I would assume they work a little bit harder to make sure that one sticks.
All right, lightning round. We're just gonna like give our overall feelings ball take on various uncommitted recruits and whether they will end up in the class or not.
Yep. Donovan Peoples-Jones.
I mean, you got to think so, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
he comes to the Michigan hospital in preparation for being in school here. You know, there hasn't really been a strong number two.
Yeah, he's another one where it's unclear who the second team they're running is. He canceled his Florida official visit this weekend because there's a hurricane. And he did switch to Ohio State, which is probably the school I least wanted him to switch it to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's not a lot of confidence from Ohio State's end. They've been pulling in a bunch of receivers. It doesn't seem that likely that Peoples-Jones would go there over here.
Yep. All right.
Oh, yeah, this is supposed to be lightning. Najee Harris.
Najee Harris, I don't think that it's better than 50% that Michigan gets him, but I just feel like they've got a real shot because if you go back and you look at that San Francisco Examiner, was it the Examiner article?
Chronicle, I think.
Chronicle,
Yeah.
which was really the only insight that we've had into his recruitment in a long time because he just doesn't talk to the media.
Yeah.
He seemed like a Harbaugh guy. When they talked about Harbaugh, their quotes were it felt like a guy who was committed to Michigan, not Alabama.
Yeah, there was a Scout article that came out within the last week. Scouts Alabama outlet did an interview with Harris's mother, and I don't know whether it was just trying to take the heat off of Najee because he hates the recruiting process, and that's been made pretty well known at this point, but that made it sound more like he was likely to stick with Alabama. I would assume he sticks there. But I do think Michigan has a legitimate shot there, but it's all about getting him back for an official. Yeah,
and if that happens, then it's really game on. I kind of feel like that just might happen in January, and he could definitely flip. I'm not predicting it, but
yeah, it's something where we're not going to know until it happens. 40%. On the way he's going through his career.
40%.
All right, that seems fair to me. Alex Leatherwood.
Probably not.
Yeah,
I just
Alabama
not.
Commit. That's
tough.
And he's from Florida.
And I mean those quotes though, man, like
yeah, they were good. But I'm going to guess that an Alabama official visit produces some similar quotes.
Yeah, I bet that's what he goes on the Alabama visit, and then that's kind of like he shuts it down.
There. Baron Browning.
No idea.
Same here. No.
Yeah.
Darnay Holmes.
So he canceled an official visit. He had a good reason to do so because he couldn't take one.
Yeah.
And that kind of like throws his entire recruitment into question because he has two older brothers who went to D1 colleges.
Yes.
And they knew that to go on an official visit, you have to take a test. So like, what does it say? Like, maybe he's not likely to be eligible?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't want to speculate too much, but that's
best
such a
bad
weird
planning,
thing. Yeah.
Which is a strange thing when your family's been through the process twice before.
I will say that if he gets on campus for like a January official visit, I'll be pretty confident.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, we'll see. I kind of get the same feeling about that. But in good news, Amber Thomas.
Amber Thomas.
There is some weird Michigan State optimism.
Yeah, there's some
I'm
Michigan
not feeling
State
that
vibe, but it's kind of like the same kind of thing last year where there was all that chatter about Lavert Hill.
Yep. And that never came to fruition and never should have.
Yeah, and like, Kelly Powell and Thomas keep swearing up and down that they're a package deal.
Kelly Powell might be next on this list, and I think we could probably go ahead and say that is about as dead of a lock as there is in this class.
I just, especially because Amber Thomas is probably going to see Michigan State, a Michigan game that
hopefully goes Michigan's way. We're kind of expecting, yeah.
I think we could say that, yes.
Yeah.
So I would be surprised if he's not in the class.
Isaiah Wilson. Another tough one. Because there hasn't been that much out there on it.
No, there's not that much out there, and like, who's number 2? Alabama.
Yeah.
So like, if they take Wills, do we get Wilson? I feel like
Michigan's going to end up with one of Leatherwood or Wilson.
Probably, yeah.
Which is great.
Or like,
they're going to end up with a house at left tackle.
I think they're going to end up with one of Wilson, Wills, or Leatherwood.
Yeah.
Like that's
getting 2 would be quite a coup for them.
You're penciling one of those guys in the class, and I think that's a pretty safe bet.
It must be nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, TJ Slaton.
TJ Slaton, I don't see it happening.
That's interesting. I do get a similar, like, kind of flaky, weird vibe from his recruitment. The basketball thing was bizarre.
Yeah.
Because if you watch his basketball film, that is not a D1 I mean, if you look at his height and weight, not a D1 basketball player. And he's an NFL-sized guard already.
It reminds me of Terrence Davis last year. What I think is going to happen is I think someone is going to come out of nowhere, like Ole Miss is going to come out of nowhere, and they're going to just pick this guy up. Because, like, he's had Michigan as a leader forever. There's not even a number 2. Like, he did come up for a visit, which is nice. It wasn't unofficial, too, right?
Yeah. That's giving me the optimism to say I think he's ending up in the class.
You do?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be surprised if...
I would not be. I think it's a lot closer to 50-50 than most people think. But just because there isn't a clear number 2 in the running right now. But if, Ole Miss or Clemson or somebody jumps in there, then... But I think Clemson's been pushing for him already. And
have they?
And there hasn't been movement. So.
Yeah, I bet he ends up somewhere in the SEC, and we think that he gets paid.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Jedrick Wills.
Jedrick Wills, 1 out of 3. He's Michigan or Alabama, and Michigan has a decent shot, but we'll see.
Yeah. Jay Tufele.
I mean, before an official visit, it's really hard to tell. I mean, Steve keeps saying that he just seems like the kind of kid who's really going to appreciate what Michigan has to offer. So I'll say yes. I say I say Michigan gets Tufele.
I'll be the skeptic because Ohio State has seemed to be kind of the constant there.
Do they have any poly guys, though?
I don't know, but I don't know if that's the ultimate deciding factor there
I
necessarily.
mean, he's so quiet that, like,
it's one where it's just who knows.
like, there's some recruits where, like, the overall public supposed leader is just like, I mean, doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
So,
Drew Singleton.
Drew Singleton, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. Cesar Ruiz.
Yes, come on.
Yep. Nico Collins.
More of an interesting one because
Yeah.
he scheduled that official. He didn't come up on it. He said he didn't get a ride, which is like, you're driving. Which, like, if you were planning on driving,
but
that's
he's
great.
taken 4 unofficial visits.
Has he? Or
Yeah.
I thought he has been 3, and that was going to be the 4th.
No, I think that was supposed to be the 5th. That's a lot to pay. I mean, even if it was only 3,
And
that's a lot to pay
that
your
is a
way
lot.
up from Alabama.
And there is a bunch of chatter about Georgia that seemed from the 24/7 mods for Georgia.
Yeah, and there was not a lot to base that on anyway.
There were no
It
quotes.
wasn't coming off a visit. There were no
No.
quotes. I'm pretty confident in Michigan with Collins.
I mean, I am too, but I'm less confident than I was a little bit before. Like, if he'd made that visit, I'd be saying lock.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Like, hopefully he gets on campus one more time.
Yeah, that would definitely drive it home, I
Yeah.
think. So hopefully an official visit is still in the cards. Oliver Martin.
He's going to be a Michigan.
Yeah. Jordan Anthony.
So I think Steve said that they couldn't move forward with him and the Reed
There is
kid.
an academic question mark there that needs to be answered, apparently.
I mean, is that slow playing a guy? Is that legitimate? Is that,
I mean, especially on the same weekend where Browning is up, you could see maybe them and other outside, they've got a pretty full outside linebacker board, so wouldn't shock me.
I'd say he ends up in the class though. Like, there's not a ton of other guys in the running for that, and like his other main contender is Maryland. And while Maryland is recruiting much better under DJ Durkin, I see him in Michigan.
Yeah, it seems like the only way Michigan doesn't get him is if they intentionally slow play him.
Possibly, yeah.
Which seems like it's in the cards, possibly, but who knows. Chuck Filiaga.
I'd say yeah. I mean, because USC is a toaster fire.
Sure. Let's
mean,
go with that.
it's not a dumpster fire.
I've witnessed one of those. My
Yeah.
grandmother used to light toasters on fire all the time unintentionally because she liked very crispy bagels.
Oh yeah, I do that too, unintentionally. So I just he doesn't really seem to have many other strong contenders. Like does he want to go to USC? I wouldn't want to go to USC.
No.
Um,
Oklahoma could be a factor.
Oklahoma could be a factor, yeah, but again, Oklahoma doesn't really look very good. We saw Urban Meyer say that Indiana probably has the best defense they've faced this year, and he's probably right.
Yeah.
So, well, I'd say Filiaga. Like, I think they take 7 guys on the offensive line. You get 1 out of Willis, Leatherwood, and Wilson. You add Filiaga, and then you add a wild card. Oh, a Ruiz. There you go.
Yeah.
So
All right. That's 7.
that's 7.
Tariq Black.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, there's not even a second-place guy for him now.
No. Darren Irving Bay.
Yes. I mean, he keeps coming up for visits. Like, follow the visits, right? Like,
Yep.
it's not that hard. Like, he was heavily favoring Michigan State.
And taking a ton of visits there.
And
then
then-
that stopped.
And then Aubrey Solomon decommitted. So you
Yeah.
know Michigan turned up the heat, and he was responsive.
Yeah.
So I think he's definitely in the class. Like,
We'll end on this one since you just mentioned him, and there has been some weird chatter about him this week. Aubrey Solomon.
Aubrey's not
It's not happening.
not happening. Ask me about Jeremiah Holman.
Wearing Michigan gear is not necessarily a sign that you're coming.
You didn't
here.
ask me about a couple guys. Shannon Reed.
Oh, right. Yeah, I kind of just stuck to 4 stars and
Sure,
up
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's a long list.
It's
man.
a long list.
A long and distinguished list. But yeah, Shannon Reed,
Shannon Reed gets slow played out of the class.
Quiddy Paye.
Slow played out of the class.
Anybody else?
Well, there's a couple guys in the class who won't sign. We just know that.
Yeah.
Not like specific guys, but like there
This
will
is
be
a Jim Harbaugh recruiting class with some guys who
Also,
you
it's
know,
2016. This happens to Alabama all the time
Yes.
too. It's just, it's bizarre.
Yeah, Will Fong wrote that whole thing about how people pay attention to Michigan's decommits for some reason and just don't look at the fact that it's happening at other major schools everywhere at the same rate, but because Jim Harbaugh is a headline grabber.
Well, and the Swenson thing is
That was
the real reason.
That was a big misstep.
Yeah.
And the optics on that were not good.
No, they weren't. So that's a hell of a class that we just projected.
Yeah, it really is. that would be super nice. So we'll see. But, I mean, if anything, it feels like we're kind of being relative skeptics on the offensive line.
I mean, you didn't even mention Banks or
By and blue.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I like that you know exactly where to step in. We don't have a tight end on that list either.
No, Josh Fowler would be the only one who was even mentioned, and I think that's going to be they're going to grab somebody late, kind of like they did last year. Asiasi was not a guy who was mentioned at all this time of year.
Michigan kept getting it was kind of like, oh, he's on the radar, he's on the radar.
Yeah, that Chase Allen guy who ended up at Iowa State popped up, and I loved his film.
Yeah.
So,
but it's even hard to know who was even on the radar. You have Tennyson.
Yeah, who seems like a Alabama or a Texas.
Yeah.
Presumably Alabama.
And then there's just not really anybody else out there.
No, I mean, they let Carter Dunaway go, so they're clearly they're not deeply concerned about the position, I don't think.
Well, also, I mean...
Dunaway was a weird take from the beginning.
It kind of says something
honest.
when this guy commits to Michigan and the recruiting sites take a look at him and they're like,
we'll keep him where he is.
He's about the 25th best kid in the state, which
Yeah.
is like, all right, they're probably right about that.
Yeah. So not a shock that he ended up not in the class, but does leave tight end kind of in a we really don't have any idea.
I mean, if
the
they're
moment.
confident in some 28 guys, they could actually take a pass this year.
They could. They certainly have a large number of tight ends on the roster right
They do.
now.
All right, we are going to get to a break. We're going to come back, and our gimmicky top 5 is regrettable decisions. Because it is Rutgers week, of course, and we must always harp on this fact.
Shout out to Jim Delaney.
There is such a thing as Rutgers week. All right, just after the break.
Hi, this is Matt Demarest from Homeshare Lending. By now, you've probably read about my company on MGoBlog, and I wanted to introduce you to a couple of the most important people in my life. My sons Cooper and Colby. Cooper, how old are you?
I'm 7.5.
Colby, how old are you?
I'm 5.
Okay, boys, I have 3 really important questions to ask you. Who's your favorite team?
Michigan.
Who's going to win the big game?
The Wolverines.
And if you could buy or refinance a house with any company, who would you use?
Homeshare Lending.
Good boys. Homeshare Lending, 855-6-BE-SURE. Visit us online if that works better for you, homesurelending.com, HOMESURE, lending.com. We've helped Brian, Seth, and a bunch of readers buy or refinance their homes, and we'd love to help you too. All right, only thing left to do. Boys, can I get a Go Blue?
Go Blue.
Homeshare Lending, NMLS number 1161358. Again, give us a call, 855-6-BE-SURE.
As Jim Harbaugh and the 2016 Michigan Wolverines begin their journey towards a 43rd Big Ten championship and 12th national title, it's important that you're also preparing for this historic season. If you find yourself on the wrong side of the law in Ann Arbor or around Metro Detroit, you want a Michigan man in the huddle. Call former prosecutor and now criminal defense attorney Jonathan Paul at 248-924-9458 or visit his website, michiganlawgrad.com.
Hey, Ace, have you ever been in a car accident?
I have not.
You have to have been in a car accident for the purposes of this ad.
I apologize for not being in a car accident.
No, you say you've been in a car accident.
I've been in a car
Now,
accident.
what happened to your insurance rates?
They were skyrocketed through the roof.
Thank you. This is a professional podcast.
This is a very
ad.
professional podcast.
Well, if you are in a car accident and your rates have skyrocketed, the state of Michigan actually allows you to avoid this by taking a defensive driver's class. And Defensive Drivers Group will provide that to you at a low cost. At defensivedriversgroup.com, take their online course, complete it as 99% of their applicants do, and get the states of Michigan, California, and New Jersey to wipe your record clean. There are no hidden fees, and the founders, who are both Michigan grads, will give you $5 off for mentioning this ad. Just say MGoBlog.
What would make your next visit to a Michigan game even better? How about getting together with your family and friends for a great tailgate with no effort? It's so easy thanks to Tailgater Concierge. Just go to tailgaterconcierge.com and choose one of their most popular packages or create a customer order to fit your specific needs. They will take care of the rest by setting up your tailgate right across from the stadium on Main Street and cleaning up afterwards to ensure you are on time for kickoff. Tailgater Concierge, an easier way to tailgate.
It seems the days we spend together all too quickly fade away.
Welcome back to the MGO podcast live at Moe's. It is Rutgers week, so we are talking about regrettable decisions that we have made in our lives. These used to be about sports.
Yeah, we've drifted away from that a little bit.
Now it's about like cheese and like the parents.
That was all you, man. Don't pin the cheese one on me.
That was a good segment.
It was.
It was a good segment.
This could be a good segment too.
It could be. Or it could not be.
I mean, we've talked about some of my regrettable decisions on the podcast before.
Yeah,
so.
we have.
So this could be quite a list.
I wonder if we get a rerun here. Regrettable decisions. Ace number 5.
Not joining the Michigan Daily. That would actually be higher on my list if things had not kind of worked out career-wise,
Sure.
I would say. But that both looked like quite a bit of fun and also
helpful.
Yeah, good job training.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote for the Every 3 Weekly. Like we helped co-found it, so
yeah.
that was good. But yes, I don't have that regret.
No.
The thing is like I'm not even like the second most accomplished person from that. Like Megan Gans, who is a TV writer for like Modern Family and various other shows, was on it at the same time I was. And so is Yoni Brenner, who wrote Ice Age 2.
All right.
The Ice Agening. I don't actually know what the subtitle was. My number 5 is taking the blog to Penn State in 2013.
Yeah, that almost made my list.
So we had this like great road trip. We're going to have a bonding experience. We're going to go out to Penn State, and then it's the 27 for 27 game. It's just the
one
worst.
sentence recap, and you weren't even mad.
We drove all the way to Happy Valley, and he was like, "Yep, there can be no more accurate recap than that one sentence recap," which I believe was the stupidest effing game I've ever seen.
Yep. Bacon almost included that in his book.
And then, of course, in the aftermath, Seth gets completely lost.
And on a campus where there is one clear direction to
right.
go,
and so we're
where
just
the cars are.
We're kind of sitting.
No. There's one. Seth is trying to tell us there was 2 options here. There were not.
We're sitting in the car. And we're just waiting for him, and I'm just like...
And waiting. Because there's also a whole iPhone charger search in here somewhere so that he can even contact us and figure out where we are.
Yeah, it was...
Planning was poor.
Mm-hmm. And so we're just upset and getting more and more upset, and finally I'm just like, all right, we're going to leave, and we're going to kind of slough this off. We're going to make Ace and... was it Heiko?
Yeah, it was Heiko.
Heiko at the time. Drive him out. So I just start Googling for places that sell alcohol.
Yes. Which in middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, not easy to find once you hit a certain hour.
And also, we needed food as well, so we
were hungry.
We managed to find a place, which was awesome.
And they stayed open late for us because they were going to close at midnight.
And one of our, he wasn't working for the blog then, but he is now, Dave, who is one of our operational assistants.
Yes. I'm going to let you tell this story.
So I ordered burgers for the guys who were in the car behind because I just knew that they were going to want to eat when they got there. And they had like a Paterno burger. And Dave said the worst thing.
Yep. You can probably already guess.
You can guess what it is. And the thing is like this is the nicest, most religious guy I know.
Yes.
And that was just kind of our mood. And
it was very out of character.
We were just apologizing to this woman.
And it turns out it's her birthday.
No. Months later, like this weighs on him.
Oh, God.
It weighs on him. So he calls the place and asks for this waitress and apologizes to this woman for his actions. And that was her birthday.
Okay.
So it all worked out in the end. But if I had my druthers, I never would have done any of that.
Yeah, that was... we got some stories out of it, but that was about it.
Ace number 4.
All right, so my junior year of college, I bought my then girlfriend like $50 worth of roses for Valentine's Day.
Okay.
It was a bit over the top. Went on a family trip like the next week, and on the flight back, I land, turn my phone back on, and I get a text message from her that she has dumped me for her Kaplan LSAT instructor.
Ooh.
And so I regretted buying the flowers because that was a poor investment.
That's like the 4th most regrettable decision you've ever made. You lost $50.
I guess it was. It sucked to get dumped for her Kaplan instructor.
I guess it did
by text.
Mine was majoring in chemistry. which I didn't actually major in chemistry, but I thought I was going to major in chemistry. I actually ended up majoring in computer engineering. But I did not conceive of the fact that since I'm kind of a forgetful person, that I'd be sitting in a lab for 8 hours and then I wouldn't get the result I needed and have to sit in the lab for another 8 hours. And then I took PChem, which is physical chemistry for those people who weren't considering to do chemistry.
I was one of those people.
Good.
Yeah.
And the professor made me write down the problem like I was in third frickin' grade. And I'm like, that's it. I'm out of here. And then I had to take like 18 credits the rest of the way out to actually finish my degree in time. So don't major in chemistry. Ever. Ace, your number 3.
College drinking story.
So this isn't the nipple thing.
No, it's not that. That might come up. We were on our way to, pregame before going out, as people do in college. And a friend and I had picked up a 12-pack of Sam Adams, kind of their seasonal variety pack. And what we had kind of missed in the memo in terms of the place we were going to is that we were doing a power hour, which is where you, if you're unfamiliar, you drink beer out of shot glasses. There's a song change every minute. You take a shot of beer every minute. It ends up being 6 beers in an hour, which is fine if you're in college and you're used to drinking and you drink, say, like Natural
PBR,
Light
yeah.
or PBR or something like that. We are drinking a variety pack of Sam Adams seasonal beers. We never made it out that night because that was sitting really, really heavy. So I think I actually kind of induced getting that out because it did not feel good sitting in there. So that stuck out.
My number 3 was getting an apartment in the building next to my college girlfriend who broke up with me.
I mean, inevitably. Yeah.
And then I'm in college and I'm like, I love this girl. So like I'm just looking out the window every day to see if she walks
Brian.
out there. It was crazy. This has happened to everybody where they're just like crazy about a person. I was crazy about this person, and I saw her like every freaking day because she lived in the building next to me.
That's rough.
Yeah, and I kind of went out there and talked to her a couple times, and it was made very clear to me that was not a good idea.
Yeah.
But I did it anyway.
Someone could have told you that. You needed a friend to be like, no.
No, yeah.
No.
Yeah. But it's hard because like if I was halfway across town, then it's like, all right, that sucks, but you kind of get over it. But she's right there.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're going to move in with a person, don't live near them, including your mother. Ace, you're number 2.
Telling about half the stories I've told on our podcast. Namely, Istanbul and the nipple incident.
Yeah, well,
and also earlier stories on this segment, probably.
Yeah, the ska band as well.
Ska band, yes.
Well, that wasn't really your fault, was it?
I mean, I brought it up initially.
You did?
That's how
Yeah.
Seth knew to search for.
Well, didn't you curse out an old lady after like the Utah game or something?
No, that was after the Michigan State game last year. So I think that was totally justified. And she was walking in with her phone right in front of her face while trying to navigate a large crowd. She didn't respond back. I think she realized it was merited. I don't regret telling that story. I'm standing by that one. But the Istanbul thing and the nipple thing, which now people think it's okay to walk up and like squeeze me, which
really?
When I'm not drunk, no, not okay.
That's, well...
that happened at the preseason thing at Circus.
I have...
And I couldn't really say you can't do that because I'd kind of given tacit permission before.
I have like 6 different responses to that, none of which I can say. Like...
I'm okay with that.
I've run them all through the filter, and I'm like, nope, trouble. So, gonna pass on that one.
We're at a family store.
My number 2 is giving my the best man speech at my wife's wedding.
Wait, what?
Well, her first wedding. So I was tasked with telling all the people assembled at this wedding why this couple was an excellent fit. How they fit together so well.
Yeah, and did you actually think this?
I did. No, I did. Well,
Okay.
You're kind of giving the speech, and you're like, oh, crap, I'm in love with her. And then it's like,
well, maybe it was good that you did, because then you
I
came
mean,
to that realization, and things obviously worked out.
Yeah, they did. I only had to shatter a man's heart.
Well,
I waited until, they were falling apart already. So anyway.
So the speak now or forever hold your peace part came in.
Well, I had already
apparently
spoken. What are you gonna do? You're gonna stand up, gonna be like, "No, I love this woman." Like that's not gonna. You gotta play the long game. That's your problem.
That's a really long game, man.
Well, their marriage lasted under a year, so it wasn't that long of a game.
Not as long as normal.
So, So yeah, that's something that I did.
Yeah. All right.
Ace,
Wrecker.
Ace, you're number one.
Spending a considerable amount of money to fly myself down to Dallas and then spending more money on a ticket so I could watch Michigan get destroyed by Alabama in 2012.
And I told you not to do this.
Yeah, you did not expense it, even though I was writing for the blog at the time, and that was a completely justifiable decision.
I was like, I'm
and
not
my
paying for
idiot
this,
self did it anyway.
and you shouldn't do this.
Yeah, no, I was warned. Did it anyway.
Did it anyway.
It was dumb.
My number one is similar but worse.
How?
I did not go to the 1998 Rose Bowl. I thought to myself, I'll go
there's
when
going to
I'm a
be another
senior.
time when Michigan's going to win a national championship and they're going to be playing for it in the Rose Bowl.
Hey,
yeah,
wait,
that
wait.
makes, and they've
Stop
got an
yelling at me.
all-time Heisman
Stop
winner
it.
there. Dude, that is offensive.
It's my number one.
No, but you still, it should be higher somehow.
Fine, it's my number
It
zero.
should have been your whole list.
It's my
Just
number.
that 5 times.
My number 0 and my number 1 is hiring you.
Okay, fair
There
enough.
we go. That
fair enough.
That's where this.
I set myself up for that
That
one.
segment was inevitably going to end there, right?
That really was. I did set the table for that earlier. And for 5 years, really, if we're being honest. But
yeah, so I didn't go to the 98 Rose Bowl. Go to the Rose Bowl, people.
yeah, do that.
Or the playoff, whatever. Go. All right. Was that a good segment, do you think?
I thought it was great.
Was it a very professional segment?
It was the most professional segment.
All right, we're going to take one more break and come back, talk about hockey with Anthony Ciotti.
The places you'll go may seem far from Ann Arbor. From San Francisco to St. Louis to Shanghai. But as members of the Alumni Association, we're never far. Because Michigan is more than a place. It's a mindset that connects us. For those who leave Michigan, but for whom Michigan never leaves, this is where you belong. The Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. Join today at umalumni.com.
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages $90,000. It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
If you need a place to stay in Ann Arbor and don't want to be stuck out by I-94, there's a new hotel downtown, and the owners, who should be well known to the Michigan community, have asked our help to get the word out. The Martin family, yes, that Martin family, recently opened the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown, just a block from Main Street and a short walk to Michigan Stadium. They're competitively priced and offer a free hot breakfast, free Wi-Fi, fully equipped kitchen in every suite, and an indoor pool. That's the Residence Inn Ann Arbor downtown.
In 1934, a salesman from Champion Sportswear walked into Moe's Sports Shop. There, he teamed up with George J. Moe to create the very first University of Michigan branded shirt. After seeing the high demand for this product, Champion went to the other Big Ten schools with the same proposal, and the collegiate apparel industry was born. Moe Sports Shops is celebrating 100 years of outfitting the Michigan faithful. Visit us at our original 1915 location at 711 North University or online at 100years.mo. That's 100years.moe.
Want the perfect game day outfit? Underground Printing has unique, great-fitting apparel and officially licensed apparel from legendary Michigan names like Woodson, Howard, Schembeckler, Ufer, and more. UGP also specializes in custom printed apparel and promotional items for groups, events, and businesses. Whether you need one shirt as a gift or 1,000 shirts for a charity walk, Underground can customize almost anything for groups large or small. To learn more, visit Underground Printing at one of our 3 convenient locations around Ann Arbor or online at undergroundshirts.com.
I take a hit from an asthma papa. I do it wrong. I was never good at spiking bombs. I'm not that good at breathing in. I'm not that good at breathing in. I'm not that good at breathing in.
Welcome back to the MGO Podcast live at Moe's. We have a hockey segment now, which it's not going to be a happy segment, I don't think. Say hi, Anthony.
Hey, thanks for having me.
He does that so much better. You do that so much better than Ace. Ace every freaking week. It's like, say hi, and he's like, yeah, he doesn't have he has a headset now, so I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. Michigan lost the first line from last year, the best line possibly in the last 10 years of Michigan hockey.
College hockey.
Really?
Maybe.
I mean, there are a couple of those, like, whatever line Jack Eichel's on.
Yeah.
I mean, but so expectations are depressed this year. Michigan was, I think, ranked third in the preseason Big Ten poll, and this has been a one-bid conference the last 2 years. So it's, I think, an unprecedented low level of expectations for Michigan, and they seem set to meet them. So Cooper Merity, one of the 3 double-digit scorers returning from last year's, suspended for this fall semester for academic reasons, which, I mean, it's just hard to see that happening 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a certain level of, I guess, professionalism that, or not professionalism, I don't know, but there's like a level of like intensity and I don't know. I guess we'll go with professionalism, where that just the program has seen kind of fall off. They keep giving up odd man rushes. They are not very good defensively, even when they have a number of guys who are coming back and have established themselves as pretty good players. But as a team, you've seen a definite fall off.
Yeah, I mean, last year they were excellent offensively, but they still did have those issues, keeping the puck out of the net a little bit, some defensive. Not as much as the years past when they were missing the tournament, but there is a lot of doubt this year about how they're going to be able to put up goals in that same volume as they were last year, especially losing as much as they have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Breaking a lot of new players, and losing Werenski as well. I think it's kind of underrated. He was a big puck mover out of the back, so they're going to have to make up for that as well. So not just the forwards that are leaving, but Werenski leaving is going to leave a big hole.
But even though Werenski left, the back 6 looks pretty solid. They have a lot of guys back. They actually skated 7 defensemen for big chunks last year. And, 1 to 6, maybe they don't have a Werenski, but they do have depth such that, like, when the third pairing's out there, I'm not really concerned necessarily that they're going to be worse than the first pairing.
That's the big thing that stands out to me for the season is they do have, like, a really good deep depth on the blue line, like you were saying. So they have Boca, they have Ciccone, Martin, Piazza, Lowen. De Jong is one of the captains. We haven't even talked about him. So, that's 6 right there. And so that's not even Luch or Luke Martin either. So,
right.
So there's going to be a lot of, I feel like, kind of shifting early on, trying to find a good 6.
Yeah.
But there will be a good 6. I'm confident. So I think the strength will be the back end for them. And it's going to be kind of unusual for Michigan because their strength is typically been up front more so than most. So it'll be a different season for them.
And then there are 3 goalies on this roster. We saw Zach Nagelvort last year, but they brought in 2 guys who are freshmen. That's correct. And each of them had a period at the exhibition that you just saw, and you were pretty impressed with both the new guys.
Yeah. So Hayden Levine played the second period. He was big, real steady, fundamental. Jack LaFontaine played the third period, and I thought he was very athletic, made a lot of really good saves, a couple desperation saves that were where he got hung out to dry. He was pretty much the reason why Michigan won in the third period. It was 1-0 for the whole game. So I was impressed with both. LaFontaine stands out to me. I feel like some of the really good NHL prospects that I've seen the last few years, he is on that level. The athleticism. His footwork was really quick. And like I said, I only got 1 period, but I was right down behind the goal, and I was really impressed with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing him more. But that doesn't mean Levine was very good as well. Just in a different way. I found to me he seemed like a larger Steve Racine, like on one just watching one period, which is not a bad thing because Racine was very good technically. So. I think they have a lot to work with, and we didn't even talk about Nagelvort, and he had a great season 2 years ago. So I feel like no matter what, they're going to get good goaltending. So that's good. And with the back end and really good goaltending, they have something to build on. It's just atypical, like we were talking about for Michigan. I feel like there is a good possibility for a good team in here. It might take some adjustment from the style they play, not necessarily going from high event hockey to low event hockey, not like plugging up the middle or anything like that, but just figuring out how to leverage, the talent they have on the back end and as the forwards come along, if they can come along, at least till Marody gets back, they'll have that one solid line from last year. So that's going to be the interesting thing for me to see this year is what can they do, as a whole, like with those adjustments. It's an atypical Michigan team.
So one thing that you just said kind of stood out to me is that they're playing one of these Canadian college teams, and you have a goalie in the third period who's standing on his head to prevent them from tying the game. And this is the kind of game where usually you're going to see shots like 60-20. It's going to be 8-0 or 8-2. I mean, you saw them play this team pretty much straight up.
Yeah, that was my takeaway. So I think Michigan had a few more shots, maybe like 4 or 5. But I think the high danger scoring chances might have even favored University of Windsor. Windsor was a 500 CIS team last year, so that's the Canadian version of their college hockey. They did not have any like standout former CHLers, so a lot of these teams will have CHLers that age out and go to college. They had a guy that was 25 had played 100 games in the ECHL, which was weird to me.
That is weird.
But they didn't really have like that former like point per game player from the CHL or anything like that. Their coach had been decorated, so he had won a lot of awards. They looked like a well-coached team. So it didn't really surprise me that, Michigan first game might have struggled a little bit, but I mean, it was just dead even. It was a dead even game.
That seems like a pretty negative outlook for the season then, because usually these teams just don't have a chance.
Right. Yeah. There was no overpowering. I actually missed the first few minutes, so I missed the only goal.
I see.
The only other goal I saw was the empty netter. But like I said, I really do feel like Windsor might have had a slight edge in high danger scoring chances. Michigan did give up maybe 3 or 4 breakaways.
They gave up 3 breakaways.
Yeah, I mean not the traditional like blue line dead breakaway, but like a turnover at the top of the circle kind of thing. There was one that Danks did. So I feel like it could be a bad sign. They do have to clean that up. It wasn't really giving me a lot of optimism, to be honest.
And then we haven't talked about the forwards yet. You have Alex Kyle back, who had a strong season last year. You had that line of Marody and Calderon and Warren, who were all – that was a very solid third line that you'd expect it to be step up and be a second line this year. But other than that, you're looking at some freshmen who were mid-round draft picks. And there's not a Kyle Connor in the bunch, but there's definitely guys who can – replicate that impact that the 2 freshmen, Warren and Marody, had last year. But where does that top line scoring come from? It's Kyle, and then there's a bunch of question marks.
Yeah, I wasn't too tuned into their line combinations. I don't think they published a line chart before the game. I did see Kyle playing with a couple of the freshmen. They did put, I believe, Danks with Warren and Calderon at times. So that would be interesting for the first half. But whatever Kyle's line is, and then whoever's with Calderon and Warren are going to be the top 2 lines, it seems. I don't know what's going to happen after that. That might be a matchup problem for a deeper college hockey team. As they get, like BU aside, but anyone else like Minnesota or something like that. Luckily, they start kind of soft, so they might have time to find their legs before they play anyone that might overpower them. Who knows?
All right, season outlook. Is this a tournament team?
I believe less talented teams have made the tournament. Absolutely.
So that's a no.
To me, I think I'm not going to bet on it.
Sure.
I don't want to be really pessimistic though, because, like I said, I do feel like they're going to have good goaltending no matter what, and they can pull 6 good defensemen out of that group of 8 we talked about. To me, the biggest key is going to be, can they adjust their system enough so that they're able to leverage their experience in the back and while their forward lines come along.
So they have to be Jeff Lurg, Michigan State, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot of 2-1, 3-2 games if Michigan's going to be good.
I mean, if they play it all like they've played the last few years, I just don't see them coming out on the good end of a lot of scores like that, because like there's going to be breakaways, there's going to be 2-on-1s, there's going to be odd man rushes, just because you know, their defensive coaching went down a cliff as soon as Mel Pearson left. So.
Yeah, and like you were talking, they don't have a Kyle Connor coming in. Their highest drafted player is Lockwood on the entire roster. So he's like 60th overall or something like that, 63rd.
Although Martin is supposed to be a first-round pick next year.
Martin was rated mid-first round. I went to compare him to Werenski. So Werenski had just turned 17 when he came into Michigan, so he was exceptionally young. Martin is exceptionally old for his draft year, so he's already 18. So I don't think we'll see the same type of I don't think the Werenski is a good comparison, even though they're in the draft year right now. I do think there is an upside, obviously.
Yeah.
He might not hit the ground running. I mean, Werenski had like twice as many points in the USHL than Martin did before his year entering college. But there is an upside. I don't think he's going to be a 1 or 2 and done.
I mean, Werenski was very much an offensive defenseman, and Martin is not supposed to be quite that. He's supposed to be a smooth skating facilitator, but not the guy who's going to wire it in from the point. God, I'm going to miss that.
Yeah. That we were so spoiled with Trouba, Werenski, in the past. Even guys like John Merrill, like they've had really good defensemen. They do have. I mean, Boca and Ciccone were invited to the World Junior Evaluation Camp, so they're also pretty good. But we don't have that super high end, top 10 pick guy anymore.
Yeah, and it's going to be quite a come down after last year, where they're just pouring in buckets and buckets of goals, and it was like, they were pretty wobbly last year, but they were a lot of fun. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm not entering the season with expectations. I'm just like, all right, we're going to see what happens, and I just not expect them much.
I'll say as a goalie, it might be fun for me though, watching those guys. I was really.
Didn't you get booted off your
yes
A-League team it was for Drew Palmisano, right?
Well, that was very short-lived.
Okay.
But I'm back in the A-League. So
you are back in the
A-League.
I'm back in the A-League. Well, congratulations, sir.
But like I said, it's going to be. Those guys are very technical. I think it's going to be good for them to have that kind of goalie. They haven't had a high-end prospect that you think is going to play in the NHL since probably Montoya.
I mean, Nagelvort did get drafted, and let's not forget about Sean Hunwick. Like, he might not have been an NHL goalie, but his save percentage was bonkers.
Oh no, I should correct myself, because Hunwick, even though the only reason he's not an NHL goalie was his size. He was an outstanding college goalie, and he was a big reason why they were as good as they were. That was their last really good team as well before last year.
Yeah, and even last year they were a little bit wobbly. They got in the tournament. They didn't need an at-large bid, but it was like, they weren't a 1 seed or anything.
They got blown out of the tournament also.
Yeah, they got outshot 26-2 or something in the first period against North Dakota.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a wake-up call. Even with these guys, they're just not at that level anymore.
So they got Union this week. 1 game against Ferris next week, right? And then a couple more weeks they have BU, which will be really interesting. And I think when they get to BU, we'll see.
Because BU has a slew of top draft picks in their freshman class. They absolutely killed it in recruiting, and they're going to be bringing more talent to Yost Ice Arena than I think Michigan has seen or will see all year. There's no question about that.
It could be around one of the more talented college hockey teams of all time. I think they have 4 first-round picks. It's too bad we don't play them in mid-December, because all those guys are going to be at the World Juniors. I went to a couple of those games, and the entirety of the USA's high end is all BU guys. So it's going to be.
I watched the NTTP scrimmage last year, and I was like, who is that? Who is that? And both those guys were going to BU. Clayton Keller and who's the other guy? I forget.
The defenseman, I can't remember. His name is escaping me, and it's just outstanding.
Just guys who really jumped off the page. I will say that Luce jumped off the page to me, even though he didn't get drafted this year. He looked like a really, really solid defensive defenseman who I thought was going to be a good college player.
I was really looking for Luce and Martin in the scrimmage, but I don't feel like, because they played so many guys, I didn't really get a good feel. So I think we'll know more after this weekend.
It takes me a long time to form a real opinion on a hockey player. All right, so that's a somewhat depressing college hockey preview. Do we have another ad break, or are we just going right in? All right. So thanks
so much for having me on. I appreciate you. And appreciate the show you guys do, and the podcast is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So now we have to talk about Rutgers, which is It's going to be difficult.
Do we have to? Do we absolutely have to? I guess we should. This is kind of what we do.
We don't have to spend a long period of time talking about Rutgers. I was writing up the preview, and I'm like, I just have nothing to say about this defensive matchup for their offense because they're just going to die.
Yeah. That ended up in both of our posts.
Yeah,
their offensive line was already horrible, and now their left tackle is probably out. And he was the only offensive lineman grading anywhere near.
The only player on their team grading out positively as a run blocker.
Yes, and he's out, and there's not really the replacement for him has a negative 2.3 grade and only 54 snaps.
Okay.
So that's not great.
And they're down Janarian Grant.
They're down really their only offensive playmaker. They do have a slot receiver who's come in, Juwan Harris, who looked pretty quick in the
averaging large numbers of yards a catch
in the Ohio State game. It was mostly on crossing routes that they did a pretty poor job of covering, but he's fast enough to get a lot of yak on that. But for the most part, I mean, the combination of having a terrible offensive line and a terrible quarterback is not good, and that's what they've got.
Okay.
I thought Chris Laviano was awful. He's grading out really poorly on Pro Football Focus right now, and it's
just all red. Everything in this document is red.
Yes, and that's not just because that is Rutgers' color. That is because they're bad. He even had a play, because they do some interesting stuff. It's not even that they're poorly coached. The play breakdown I had in their offensive film post, they dialed up a run-pass option that was perfect for what they got on the look of Ohio State's defense, where Ohio State had a bit of an oaky front, and it had kind of a bubble fake after a motion. They had a receiver running up the seam, another receiver just kind of taking the coverage outside, and then they had a QB power on to the other side as the run part of that option. Laviano's staring at the slot receiver who could not be more wide open. He really could not be more wide open. And instead pulls the ball down. The QB power is not blocked well. Ohio State has an extra defender hanging over to that side who probably should have gone in motion with the receiver who motioned out and ran a bubble because they don't have enough guys to guard these people. And Laviano decides to run into the teeth of this, abort the run, and just throw the ball out of bounds, even though he did, at that moment, actually have a dump-off option to the guy who should have been his lead blocker and recognized that the play was totally borked and that he should help out. And he had turned around and was wide open, too, and Laviano chucks into the Ohio State bench. And
the
it was
picture
just like,
is vivid.
Yeah, it's just, that post ended up on Rutgers' rivals board, and I expected that to be a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah.
And instead, all of them were like, this is on point, and a bunch of them quoted that play breakdown and just posted GIFs of people shaking their head. It was a pretty entertaining read.
So, they got something like 120 yards of offense against Ohio State.
Yes.
There will be some vagaries because they might hit a big play or whatever. That's what football is. But
Yeah,
I think we're expecting about the same thing.
Yeah, I think, they crossed midfield once against Ohio State, and 2 plays after they did that, they ran a flea flicker that featured 2 fumbles, and the second one was a pitch back to the quarterback that went over his head and ended up back in Rutgers territory. So they never finished a drive in Ohio State territory, and they punted on literally every possession that did not end a half.
And the thing about their punts is about half of them that don't go in the end zone end up returned. And
their coverage is not particularly good on Washington returned a punt for a touchdown. Against Ohio State, Dante Wilson had one where he fielded the ball at the Ohio State 30, and there wasn't a player within 15 yards of him. And he only got 13 yards out of that return, and he was pissed at himself.
Sure.
And he should have been.
Yeah.
Because that was, if Jabril Peppers catches that ball, it's over.
Yeah.
It is absolutely over. And they also nearly had a punt blocked in the beginning of that game, and then had one where I really don't have any idea how the guy didn't actually block it again later in that game.
You're talking really, really fast about this.
And I'm trying to get through Rutgers as fast as humanly possible. I want to go home. They're bad.
They're bad.
And there's going to be a big play on special teams.
Yeah.
Their offense, I'm expecting a shutout. If I'm being perfectly honest about this,
Their kicker's 6 of 7. Though.
Their kicker's decent, but
So
he was irrelevant in the Ohio State game because they could never get into range.
They do have an interesting defense.
They do. I mean, Darius Hamilton is really good,
and that's he's going up against some guys who have maybe had a little bit of a struggle for Michigan.
Yeah.
They actually have a number of other guys who are pretty good defensive linemen.
Yes.
Their secondary is strong with a couple of exceptions.
I thought PFF was grading them out better than they, at least in the Washington game. Their highest graded player in the secondary, and actually their entire back seven, is Isaiah Wharton, their cornerback. He lost a step on a fly route early on in the Washington game. It was overthrown by Washington's quarterback, Jake Browning, but if it had been in range, it was going to be one of those where either you're giving up a huge play or you're committing pass interference to make sure you don't.
Okay.
And later in that game, he gets completely toasted on a fly route for a touchdown down the sideline. It seems like J.U. Chesson this might be the breakout game for him.
Okay.
They were also really bad up the seam and kind of underneath their
their linebackers are all...
Their linebackers are bad.
And
their best coverage linebacker is the guy who got hurt last week and carted off.
On a helmet-to-helmet contact with
his own guy.
Teammate.
Yeah, so not an ideal situation for them on the second level. So as long as Michigan can handle the defensive line, they should be pretty good in the run game. And passing, I assume Jake Butt's going to have a pretty nice game as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see... They run a ton of cover 4. This is, they're basically just Ohio State, New Jersey edition.
Yeah.
And their safeties were getting toasted up there. I mean, the guy who's coming back, who was their opening day starter, and now their free safety who's been playing the last 3 games is questionable. This guy started over him anyway, so I assume he's going to be reinserted into the starting lineup. In 18 snaps, I thought he should have been responsible for 2 touchdowns and also was responsible for giving up a first down on the jet sweep.
Okay.
There was a play action where he just stayed flat-footed while a receiver ran up the seam right behind him and never turned. And if the quarterback had thrown it on time, it was an easy touchdown. And then he did get burned for a touchdown while playing cover 4 against a slot and still got burned by about 5 yards.
Is this the worst team Michigan's played all year?
Yes. They are worse than Hawaii, both on S&P Plus and in terms of when you look at the film. I mean, they're really, really bad. I don't know how else to say it. They're awful.
I think we've. Do we have any user questions that we were going to answer?
Yes, we do.
All right. Because we can stop talking about Rutgers whenever.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So, Go Blue Noser asks, what is now the second toughest game left on the schedule?
Second toughest game left on the schedule. By the fancy stats, you'd say Iowa, but I think it's still Michigan State. Because that their entire season at this point is like, let's beat Michigan.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. Like the games that pop to mind as contenders are the Iowa, and they've just looked so awful that I can't imagine that's a tough
they
one.
beat this Rutgers team by 7 points.
Yes, and that should never happen if you're a Division I team. Indiana came to mind, but that's at home.
But, they have a defense now.
Yeah, they do.
So
that could be, but I just don't, I can't believe that Indiana is going to slow down Michigan successfully. And their quarterback is kind of a loose cannon.
Yeah, he's a loose cannon.
And the Maryland's actually the other game that kind of came up, but that would be heck of a one-year turnaround.
This is a closer question than I thought it would be.
Yeah. All 3 of those teams are ranked well ahead of Michigan State in the advanced stats right now.
It's a completely different world when you're talking about just the amount of hatred that those people get up for Michigan.
Yeah, I'm still expecting them to have like half a new playbook for that game just because that's what they do.
Like there are 3 weeks between now and the Michigan State game, and while Michigan isn't going to be doing anything except preparing for Michigan State because they have Rutgers and Illinois, Michigan State is also going to be preparing for Michigan. And it doesn't really matter who they have between them because there are a lot of teams that can beat them in the next 3 weeks that they're playing.
Yeah, the only 2 things they have to play for now are this Michigan game and bowl eligibility. So,
and let's hope they get neither of them.
That would be wonderful.
Ace, question.
This is good because we kind of skimmed over this in the UFR review. How will Grant Newsom's injury affect the O-line? Are we officially 1 injury away from disaster now? That sound indicates a certain answer.
So Bushell Beatty was actually okay in pass protection. They helped him out. And
they did leave a tight end over there.
They shielded him a little bit, but that's something that I think is fine.
Yeah.
On the ground, he wasn't great, but
he did also get thrown into the fire there.
Yeah,
so
he
you're
got thrown
hoping
into
for
the fire
some
against a very good player. It is a downer because I think that, going into the season where we're like, I mean, if there's an interior injury, probably Kugler can cover that. That's going to be fine. But the thing about Bushell Beatty is that, this spring he was playing a lot of guard. He's kind of bounced in and out, and there hasn't really been a lot of positive chatter about him.
No.
I think in the season preview I was like, this guy's probably never going to play because.
I mean, he did not look good in the spring game. He really didn't.
And what are we hearing all fall camp?
That Ben Bredesen was pushing for that job.
Yeah, and we'll see. I do think that obviously he's got 2 weeks to. Well, actually, he might not have 2 weeks because Illinois has Dwayne Smoot.
Yeah, that's a very good edge rusher.
But I mean, Michigan's going to win that game probably either way. So that we'll get an insight on how he copes with a somewhat salty Illinois front seven. But yeah, it's a downer. It's a much bigger downer than losing Jeremy Clark.
Yeah, and the second question about whether they're one injury away from disaster kind of seems like that's a yes on the offensive line at this point. At least if it happens at tackle, absolutely.
If it happens at tackle, they flip Cole out.
Yeah,
there's no other option, and that's probably not ideal, but they can probably survive it. I mean, obviously every downgrade in offensive efficiency. I mean, it really only matters for the Ohio State game.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's hope.
They're going to be able to shut down everybody else's offense, and they might lose something on some fluky stuff, but it doesn't really move the needle very much for me in any of those games.
Yeah, but they're going to need every edge they can get against Ohio State.
Yeah,
that's
and
where it really comes up.
That's the big downer. So hopefully Spake gets a lot better because he's going to need to be. Anything else?
Rutgers did release that they are wearing their all-black uniforms and tweeted that tomorrow the Dark Knight rises, which is going to be hilarious. It is appropriate to wear black to your own funeral.
Ooh.
Hey-o. Had that one lined up.
Did you?
Also, Isaiah Wilson just announced that he is going to take an unofficial visit to the Rutgers game tomorrow. And of note, Rutgers is not in his top 5. So I think he's getting an early look at Michigan before he takes his official starting in November because he's from New York. So that's an easy trip for him.
Well,
he made sure to say that is an unofficial visit. So that's not taking the place of any of his top 5. That is just another chance to look at Michigan creaming the local school.
Well, that'll be exciting for Rutgers to have a 5-star. I mean, every little bit helps.
He's not quite in the Garden, so we don't get to make a fence the Garden joke, unfortunately.
Those are all played out. All right. Anything else on the Rutgersness of everything?
No, we're good. I've seen so much more Rutgers this week than I needed to.
I mean, I think that Chris Ash is probably going to be good long term, but you have to think about the fact that they're coming off a coaching regime that thought that if he didn't wear Rutgers clothes, he could go conspire
Incognito.
To change grades. The Big Ten, we really lost 2 of the dumbest coaches in the history
maybe
of our
the 2
great
dumbest
conference.
coaches.
And Tim Beckman and Kyle Flood. I miss them. I really do.
Yeah, they provided great material.
They did. We would like to thank our sponsors, Underground Printing and Moe's, Homeshare Lending, the Alumni Association of the University of Michigan, the Residence Inn Ann Arbor Downtown, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Tailgater Concierge, Michigan Law Grad, Defensive Drivers Group. Of course, thanks for Anthony Ciotti for stopping by and talking to us about hockey, even if it was depressing.
Who's got it better than